everybody. Is it on yet?
I guess.
No. Hi. Okay. So we're actually going to talk about something that I think is a little different of a topic than what we've been talking about today. We're coming from the advertising world, and we're going to talk about brands and the impact that it has on the longevity of a startup and how you can actually use that to your advantage.
All right. All right, so I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of people in the crowd right now who are thinking about a million things that they have to do. You know, I mean, in the startup world, you've got a product to develop, you've got to look for funding, you've got operations, you've got to find talent. And so, you know, it really, there's so many different aspects to what's going on. It's not surprising that a lot of people wait to really form what their brand stands for until they've got all these right things in place. But it's really, really important and critical in the beginning to really start with what your mission is, because that will help guide you, it'll help focus you, it'll help make you more palatable to the people who are going to provide that funding and more attractive to the people who are ultimately going to bring in the talent. So we're really here to kind of turn that on its head and walk you through why it's really important that you don't wait. So brands build staying power. I grew up in New York, and Howard Stern was a radio personality coming up in the late 80s, and he was gaining a lot of notoriety for his controversial show. And my mom, like a lot of other moms, strictly forbid my brothers and I from listening to his show because he was filthy and foul-mouthed and said a lot of the things that, you know, Cindy Gallop said last night. And, you know, my brothers and I, much like the other kids in our neighborhood, started listening to his show religiously for all of the same reasons, because he was filthy, foul-mouthed, and he'd say all these things that nobody would say. And that, in a nutshell, is the power of a brand. When a 45-year-old woman, an 18-year-old college student, a 12-year-old kid can all very clearly state what you're about, whether they align with it or not. That's a really powerful tool. And it's not always easy. I mean, for Howard Stern, when he started out, he was fired from his first job. He had parent and community groups rising up and trying to shut him down. He was fined, I believe, $2.5 million from the FCC throughout his career. And so, you know, I think in retrospect, it was really well worth it for him for where he landed. But at the beginning of his career, I think most of us would shiver a little bit at the thought of a seven-figure bonus or start to at least rethink our content. So the fact that he stuck with that, though, ultimately solidified his audience base. It proved that he was authentic. It proved that he was true to what he was offering to the marketplace. And that's what elevated him from being another New York DJ to the status of an $80 million show host on Sirius Radio with a previous political campaign, movie deals, and New York Times bestsellers. So that brand actually became the beacon that helped him elevate past that. So at the end of the day, building a brand is like building any human relationship. It really comes down to defining what you stand for and what you believe in, and really using that as your guiding light going forward, and finding the people that best align with that. So
I think in the beginning stages of a startup and even the later stages, we're very transaction-oriented. So when I think of transaction, I think, you know, is my funnel leaky? Did I A/B test enough? Should I A/B test again? Should I split test again and again and again? And do we get incrementally better and add incrementally more features? And I'm not saying that that's not important, because ultimately you end up at a place of profitability, but I think I want you to equally think about reaction. And there's a saying that I think speaks to this really well. And it's that you don't always remember what people say, but you always remember the way that they made you feel. And that's what you want to accomplish with your brand. So every time someone's clicking around on your site, they might transact, but if they get an emotive, if you elicit an emotive reaction from them, then they're going to align with you and build an affinity and come back because it meant something. And so it's that human truth that really allows you to do that. And I'm going to talk about an example that was from the Unconference yesterday. So I'm not sure if everybody knows, but there was an Unconference yesterday where the community came together and just held discussions around things that were important in the startup community. And Noah and I held a workshop, and we said, we want you to walk in with your product, and we're going to help you walk out with a brand. And one of the startups that did that is really, really badass. They're actually building the first roller coaster in Iceland. And they said, okay, we want to build a roller coaster, but it's going to be different because it's going to go through the scenery in Iceland, which typically a roller coaster would be sort of in an amusement park. And they're like, but we also want to bring it to other countries, and we don't know how to articulate that, or what should we stand for. And so if you think about that, like when I think about Iceland, I think about serenity and beauty and calmness and like sort of like that, like that escapism, like the anti-New York.
Except on Friday and Saturday nights.
Yeah. No regrets. So what they're doing, I think, is not just saying, hey, we build roller coasters and we're going to have a lot of fun. I think what they can really stand for is say, hi, we're the creators of the most beautiful thrill you've ever had. And so it's taking something that was that escapism of relaxation and turning it on its head and being the people who help you experience nature in a completely different way. And now you can do so many more things with that. So at the end of the roller coaster, I'm going to get off, and there's going to be Iceland's biggest trampoline, and I'm going to jump on it and see over the mountains, and no one's ever let me do that before. And I'm not going to be a roller coaster and a trampoline company. I'm going to be redefining the way you experience those things.
So that said, I mean, products are bits of plastic and metal and code. They're really rational things, but brands are greater than the sum of those parts. When you think about somebody like Bill Bowerman from Nike, you know, when he set out to build the first pair of Nikes and he stole his wife's waffle iron, he wasn't looking to build an equitable shoe brand or to build a nice product. He was looking to shave seconds off of his runner's time and build performance. And that's something that comes from the gut, and it's something that takes a lot of collaboration between the gut and the brain to figure out how to bring to fruition. But that guiding light of performance is ultimately what grew Nike's entire brand. And when Dan Wieden penned Just Do It, which are arguably three of the most powerful words in advertising, that was a direct extension of that brand, and it was as much to Bowerman's credit as it was to Weiden's credit. So really harnessing that piece of what you're doing and why you're doing it is incredibly important. You know, Bowerman wasn't looking to what the shoes were made of. He was looking to what the people who are wearing those shoes were made of, and that's something that Converse couldn't claim, that's something that Rockport couldn't claim, and it helped to differentiate him from the rest of his product set.
So we want you to help think about how to do this for yourself, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I have a startup called FitSteady, and we help make it easier to access personal trainers, and we didn't start with a product, we started with a mission. And so I'm going to ask you all to think about your mission, and you're not allowed to include profit, because let's just assume that's a constant variable. So, I hope. So pick like 3 to 5 things that you absolutely live for, and you couldn't live without it. You won't change, no matter who comes and shoots an arrow in your back. You're going to pull it out and keep running forward. And by doing that, you're also going to realize what you don't stand for and what you won't do. And knowing what you won't do is just as important as knowing what you will do. Because if you just chase money, you're going to end up not standing for anything and just getting swallowed up. So for FitSteady, we're all about making personal fitness more accessible for people. So whenever and from that guiding light, I know that our homepage is never, ever, ever going to have a really hot guy with a six-pack with sweat on it and make me feel like I'm so inferior and not good-looking that I can't go to that gym. Because that's the opposite of what we are. We're the people who say, we know exercise happens in your backyard, in your sweatpants from high school that's just magically happen to still fit and have some holes in them. And that's okay, and that's the reality of what getting in shape is, and we want to crack that nutshell open. So with that guiding light, I know what I won't do and what I will do. And when people try and poke at me and give me advice and tell me my model should change and all those things, I know that I'm going to stay true to that mission, and hopefully that's going to carry me through for the next 5 years. So what's interesting is we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs before we made this presentation because we assumed that we knew nothing and that we were total idiots. And so we talked to startups in New York and startups in Austin, and I asked, like, so when you think of your brand, what do you think of, and how do you bring that to life? And the answers I got were, well, whenever I send an email out, I always make sure that it's green and blue, and our logo is really big on top. And whenever we throw a party, we have our logo really big on the wall, and the napkins have our logos on it so everyone knows who we are. And I think that it is so much more than your logo and your color scheme. That's the period at the end of the sentence after you've decided why you're running so fast, why you made the completely irrational decision of starting a company, because there was something in here that was burning so bad that you had to do it. And that logo is just one visual articulation of that. And so you need to know why that logo is there and why you're running so fast before you put a logo down and just say, yeah, we did it.
So this is just a quick demonstration of how that process comes to life. We decided to use one of Ted's data set charts as inspiration. So this is the entrepreneurial situation in Iceland brought to life through PulsePoint. PulsePoint was a company that was formed last year when Daytran Media, which was an audience tool in the ad tech space, and Context Web, which is a web contextualization company, came together. And you can imagine the 1 + 1 = 3 situation that you get when you have people and you have placement. But in terms of sitting down with their board and going through things with their CEO, it became incredibly clear that they both had these incredibly broad product stacks. So in terms of how do we bring that to life and position it, it really came back to positioning them as a choreographer of smarter engagements across the digital spectrum. And we had to bring this to life in a way that could also break out into incredibly deep subproducts, which is a pretty complicated assignment, especially when you basically need a translator to understand how the ad tech industry works in the first place. So what we did in bringing this to life was literally use the spectrum as the base for our color, but we used it purposefully because each of those colors could then break out and represent a different silo or vertical within those single point solutions. We actually use diminishing points to represent the fact that this is a company that lights up the long tail. When you use all of their products in concert, it creates a holistic experience that creates white space at the center, and they had PhDs who helped analyze that data, which accounts for the big circle. And then from an approachability standpoint, one of the things that across the board in the ad tech space that happens is a lot of focus on the technology and the way that the sausage is made. So we really wanted to take something that was going to put a little bit more of a human face and a little bit more personality on it, so it shows a rounded face. So all of those are design decisions, and all of those become the face of the company, but all of those decisions were made with the brand in mind, so that the brand is coming to life through that product, and then that will come through in the tone of everything we do from that point forward. So that's just one quick example. So how does that impact you in the long run if you do build your brand correctly? This is actually a quote directly from Coca-Cola, that if they were to lose all of their production-related assets in a disaster, they'd survive. But if all of the consumers were suddenly to have amnesia, then the company would go under. And so when you think about it, when you remove the refreshment, the summertime fun, the Americana out of Coca-Cola, you're left with corn syrup, sugar, and water. So, and this actually has become more valuable than the product itself. So think about that right now when you're in that startup phase and you have all of these different things going on, because now is the time to really start to craft some of those visions so that you can move in a straight line towards something like this. This is just a quick sample of a tool that we use internally when we start to work on a project. Is really defining the right place to play. If you're a commodity brand like toilet paper, you're not going to get people to start posting about you on Facebook and to wear your t-shirt and to interact with you. The same way that you might with Apple, which is obviously very community-oriented. If you're in the design scene, it has a badge of value to it. A lot of people go to universities, and universities are great. I don't think people are super excited about working on university projects. I think universities are very inspiring, but it's not the same emotional intensity that you would see with something like Apple. And then, on the one-to-one side of things, you might give your girlfriend an engagement ring. You might post a note saying that you're engaged, but it's a very personal one-to-one communication on the emotional side of that spectrum. So helping to understand where in those quadrants you live will help you plot where you can take it. And it's going to be pretty hard to move from toilet paper up to Apple, but you might move a little closer to the emotional side of it if you can be more playful in tone. Or you might be able to find a white space between somebody who's pointing at price versus comfort. So I think being able to go through your quadrant and define your right to play is also really important, because it'll keep you from building a brand that's doing the same thing that a lot of other brands out there might be doing.
Or from wearing toilet paper t-shirts.
Yeah.
So if you do that exercise right, you're going to have people that hate you, and you're going to have to get comfortable with that, because that means you're doing a really strong thing. For example, if you go back to Howard Stern, if Howard Stern had given in and said, you know what, I can't be as crude, and Noah walked in on his mom listening to Howard Stern in the kitchen, one, that's really awkward, and two, he'll probably never listen to Howard Stern ever again, because that's not what Howard Stern stands for. So if he had chased the dollars, that's what he would have done, but he didn't. And every good company has their adversary, like Mac versus PC. And you almost, it's like a jump-off point, like, yeah, they're that, but you know what, we're this, and here's why. So if you reach that point, instead of getting scared, you should be proud, because that means you stood your ground and you're really going to go far.
Well, and another part of it, too, is also adapting your product to what 10 different markets want is going to dilute what you stand. I mean, because at the end of the day, you don't own your brand. Your customers are going to own your brand. And when you go out into the marketplace and you say, this is what I stand for, and then you start to change it every 2 weeks because there's a new market opportunity here, there's a new market opportunity here, it becomes much more complicated to backpedal from that and try to stand for one thing.
So once you decide what you stand for, I think there's a huge difference between saying it and doing it. And instead of just talking the talk, I really want you guys to walk the walk. That's where the power comes in. So my example for FitSteady is, if we're all about making personal fitness more accessible, I actually don't care if you come to the site and you just view the content and you don't buy anything and I helped you, because my mission is to help you. And so one way that came to life was trying to dispel, walking into the gym with the 50 machines that you have no idea how to use, and going out with all of the trainers that I have in the network and actually shooting videos of myself working out with them in my high school sweatpants in their garages where they work out, and saying, look, this is what real fitness looks like, and every workout I give you is going to be only 5 minutes long, because everyone has 5 minutes, and that's the most accessible chunk of time. So it wasn't about you watching me work out because, I want to be a celebrity, but if I am, that's okay. It's about showing people, that we really stand for something and we're doing it ourselves. It's more than just the homepage headline, and it's more than, was my site parallax and my user experience really slick, and did I get you to become a recurring paying customer? I do want that to happen, but I want you to feel something when you do it.
Yeah, I mean, another quick example is the way that you bring your product to life in the outside world. I mean, you look at Nike, and there's a lot of companies out there that will contribute monies to a charity. So they'll write a $50,000 check to the Boys Club of Oregon. But instead of doing that, what they do is they take their product and recycle it down afterwards, and then go into inner city areas and start to build basketball courts out of Nike Grind. What that does is it positions them as a member of the community. It gives people an opportunity to actually have access to a basketball court, and it delivers directly on their brand of performance in a way that adds another layer to what they do beyond just kind of writing a check. It shows that they're active members of the performance community.
And those kids are never going to forget that.
So then finally, when we were at the Unconference yesterday, there were some people who were asking about international expansion. What do we do when we get to that point where we want to move outside of Iceland, and all of a sudden this product that works really well here might have a different take in the States or might have a different silo. So this is based off of something that was in the Harvard Business Review last month, the T strategy, but it also is something that has been alive and well in marketing for a decade. It's the notion that you've got to come up to the human truth. When my partners and I launched Xbox back about 12, 13 years ago when we were at McCann Erickson, the initial play, especially going up against Sony, who owned entertainment, was all about power. And that was something that was really important to gamers in the US, because if you had a more powerful system, your car could blow up more ways. You could run faster graphics. It was a really big value proposition. And so there it was all about the way that you could harness power into a fighting game or into a fantasy game or into all of the different types of games that they had. But as they decided to expand globally, it needed a bigger human truth because it wasn't an international message. So rather than coming up with a different brand for every single country that they came into, they found a human truth at the top, and that human truth was that it's good to play together, right? It was that people bond over gaming. So for some countries, it might be about playing a fantasy game with 4 of your friends. In some parts of the country, it might be a father-son bonding moment. It might be through Xbox Live and innovations like that that had people across the ocean playing with each other or just playing with complete strangers. But starting with the human truth of people like to interact with each other, and then tailoring that truth to the European market, to the American market, to the Asian market, allowed us to create something that was brand cohesive, even though it was a little bit more custom in every market that we went into.
So lastly, I just want to say that this isn't exactly an immediate gratification exercise, but it is free. And it is really important. And if you do it in the beginning, it'll be a lot easier than later when you have 20, new hires and you didn't define what you stood for yet, and everyone wants to be something different, and then you have to get all the key stakeholders on board and have meetings for 20 weeks, and then you end up with something you never liked anyway, versus, setting that, that star in the sky from the very beginning. And I think the best brands do that, and they do it really well for 5, 10, 20, 25 years. And it's, the end goal should be whatever that logo is. If you erect a retail store and the whole thing's painted black and there's no windows but your logo's on the outside, I know exactly what's going to be inside, and I can't wait to get in line. So, thank you.